A kebab shop makes a large share of its entire week's money in the few hours after the pubs and clubs close on a Friday and Saturday night, which means the busiest, most profitable moment of the week is decided by somebody else's closing time. In a building you are paying rent on 7 days a week. You are not really in charge of when you make your money. The nightlife around you is. Hold on to that, because everything else about the business bends around it. Start with the shape of the week, because it is stranger than it looks. A kebab shop is open long hours, often late into the night, sometimes every day. But the trade is not spread evenly across those hours. It is concentrated heavily into a small number of peaks. The lunch trade, if you have it, the early evening dinner runs, and above all, the late night rush at the weekend, when a large number of people leave licensed venues at once, hungry and looking for the nearest hot food. That weekend rush is not a nice bonus, on top of a steady week. For many takeaways, it is the week. The quiet Tuesday afternoon does not subsidize the Friday night. The Friday night is what carries the quiet Tuesday afternoon. And that creates a very particular problem, because rent does not work in bursts. The unit is rented continuously, the lease is signed for the whole year, and the rent is due whether the shop is heaving or empty. So you are paying, at a steady rate, for a space that genuinely earns in a narrow set of windows. Through every slow weekday afternoon, the lights are on, the equipment is warm, somebody is usually being paid to stand behind the counter, and very little is being sold. The building costs the same at 3 on a wet Wednesday afternoon as it does at midnight on a Saturday. You are paying, all week, to be ready for a few hours of it. Then there is the food itself, and the number that pulls people in. A single kebab, or a burger, or a portion of chips carries what looks like a healthy margin. The ingredients cost a certain amount. The finished item sells for several times that, and if you do the sum on one order, it looks like a good business. This is the figure that gets people to buy a takeaway in the first place. But the margin on one order was never the point. The point is how many you have to push through the counter, how fast, in how short a window, to cover a whole week of fixed costs. A takeaway is a high-volume business compressed into a handful of frantic hours, and the difference between a good week and a poor one can come down to whether it rained on the Saturday and how busy the pubs were before closing. The kebab was never the hard part. The hard part is the timing, and the timing belongs to other people. Now widen the view to the street because the shop is rarely alone. On most high streets, the takeaway sits in a row. A kebab shop, a fried chicken place, a pizza counter, a burger spot, all clustered together, all open the same late hours, all waiting for the same crowd to spill out of the same venues. That clustering is not an accident. They gather where the late-night footfall is because the footfall is the whole asset. But it means you cannot really move on price. If the shop 3 doors down is charging a certain amount for a similar thing, you cannot charge much more because a hungry customer at midnight will simply walk the extra few steps. And you cannot easily undercut them into oblivion either because your costs are much the same as theirs. You are all fishing in the same small pond at the same time of night for a crowd that none of you created and none of you can grow. The pubs made that crowd. You are just competing over it. Then, in the last few years, another party arrived and took a seat at the table. The delivery apps. A takeaway can now reach people who never leave the house, which sounds like pure upside until you look at what it costs. A delivery platform can take somewhere between a quarter and a third of the value of everything sold through it. And in exchange for that cut, it places itself permanently between the shop and the customer. The app owns the relationship. The app holds the data, the order history, the name, and the address. The customer feels loyalty to the app, not to the kitchen that actually cooked the food. So you are handed a genuine choice, and both doors cost you something. Stay off the apps, and you give up all the trade that now happens on a phone. Go on the apps, and you hand over a large slice of every order, and the customer along with it. You built the food. Somebody else owns the person eating it. And underneath all of this sits the quiet, longer risk, because the whole model rests on one thing, that the nightlife keeps turning out crowds. When pubs and clubs close down, when fewer people go out late, when a town's evening economy thins, the late-night takeaway feels it directly and immediately. Your peak is downstream of their trade. If the venues that create your crowd start to disappear, the crowd disappears with them, and there is very little a kebab shop can do about it from behind its own counter. So consider what you are actually running. You are running a business whose best hours are set by other people's licenses. In a unit you pay for around the clock, selling at a price, the shop next door has effectively fixed, increasingly through an app that takes a third and keeps the customer, all resting on a nightlife economy you do not control and cannot protect. So if you decide to buy a kebab shop, understand what you are actually buying. You are not buying a food business that happens to open late. You are buying a few hours of somebody else's Friday and Saturday night, rented by the year, shared with the shop next door, taxed by an app, and dependent on a crowd you can only hope keeps arriving. The food is the easy part. The margin was always there. What you are really paying for is the right to be open and hot and waiting at the exact moment everyone else has closed.